So I want to go through this. I thought the last few videos I made were good in content, but then I realized I'm speaking too slow. Probably because I haven't slept in a while, and because the time I was actually making them in comparison to the time that they were getting uploaded, making them when somebody's asleep, and then trying also to do them because this seems to hit way up in the volume hits at the top. So let's see if I can go through this quicker, easier, and hopefully less painful to listen to or watch. I stumble across this thing and it blows my mind. It has correct view and incorrect view. The incorrect view is the church is the determiner of canon, the church is the mother of the canon, the church is the magistrate of the canon, the church is the regulator of the canon, the church is the judge of the canon, the church is the master of the canon. Canon meaning New and Old Testament. The correct view: the church is the discoverer of the canon, the church is the child of the canon, the church is the minister of the canon, the church is the recognizer of the canon, the church is the witness of the canon, the church is the servant of the canon. Which, of incorrect view, maybe two of those are different. I mean, judge, master, regulator, magistrate, determiner. Those can all just be master and mother of the canon. What does it mean by canon? It means by the works of the apostles that we have in the Bible, in the New Testament, and what comprises the Old Testament. Now, the church is the discoverer of the canon, child of the canon, minister, recognizer, and witness, servant of the canon. Yeah, I want to know from people who believe in a Bible-based church, what piece of the New Testament was written before Pentecost? So Jesus wasn't on this earth when anything was written. There was a period when you had no writings for the New Testament. And Christ in his gospel says, "You have heard this, but I tell you this." So Mosaic law isn't revealing Christ to you. Christ is actually canceling out. And even beyond that, even after the Ascension and Pentecost, you have Simon Peter hearing a voice from heaven, kill and slaughter, with the sheep coming down. You know what I have made clean, you shall not declare unclean. And Paul fighting against the Judaizers, and John fighting against the Docetists. Which, all you have to realize, all these works, if you actually believe they are what they are, the Epistle to the Romans, that was in Rome, that ended up in Rome. The Gospel was written in different cities at different times, decades apart. There's a letter to Thessalonica, a letter to Galatia, a letter to Ephesus. You have Peter's letters, you have John's letters, you have John on Patmos. So let's say John was the Apostle John, right? Which is highly contested among the early church. And even scholars and critics say, yeah, the writing of 1 John and the Gospel of John, that's the same writer. And possibly 2nd and 3rd John are part of that. But not Patmos, and there's none of the nobody ever writing about the apostles in that time that's being martyred or defending Christianity against the Judaizers or the Docetists or the Gnostics, the Marcionites. They all say John died in Ephesus, that he moved there, the mother of the Lord, the Theotokos, not the mother of the Trinity. the mother of Jesus, moved there and was there. There's no exile. It's a different John. Which, again, who cares if he's part of the early church? You can get a revelation. And he is a follower of Christ. Okay. But even of the books, who tells you Timothy doesn't go in? Barnabas doesn't go in. The Didache, which was written by the 12 apostles. In fact, everybody accepted that one, said you should read this, or even if it's not by the, well, no, nobody said it wasn't by the 12 apostles. But everybody knew it, so why would you? It's not an account of the history, but it's things that should be practiced. Even Athanasius of Alexandria, where James White and all the Calvinists marked their, oh, this is where we get our 39th Paschal letter in 367 AD. 367 AD. Remember that date. That's pretty important. That's 300 years or so after the apostles are gone. He's the one, him alone, has the authority to assemble at Athanasius of Alexandria. And even in his Paschal letter, which Calvinists and Lutherans like to cling to, he says read the Didache. The Didache should be read. Same with Shepherd of Hermas and First Clement. Shepherd of Hermas is extremely early. First Clement's within the 1st century. So the compiler of the New Testament, this was in reaction to Marcion, when Marcion cut up Luke and started cutting up Paul, because there was no New Testament. Even the people speaking about, the early writers talking about these quoting, that we can see, oh wow, this is really early quoting from these texts, have no, I mean, one of the earliest ones, Clement of Rome, no concept of a canon. Ignatius of Antioch was taught by John, no concept of canon. Polycarp, no concept of canon. You have to get down the line until people even mention that word or talk about, this. We have another codifying of books. Because why? Because Christ came, established the church, which the gates of hell should not prosper against. And it was the belief in Christ, the active belief in Christ, people evangelizing, baptizing, and that's how the church moved on, through people, not through a collection of books. And you can't find an ancient codice that has all of the works of the New Testament, and no extra ones like Shepherd of Hermas or Clement or Barnabas or Acts of Paul or this stuff. And you can't find an ancient canon of the New Testament or an ancient codice collection of the New Testament that has all those books. The Antilegomena, the disputed books, were James, 2 Peter, 2nd, 3rd John, Hebrews, and the Apocalypse of John. And the Apocalypse of Peter. They didn't know if that was a close one. So was Shepherd of Hermas. How much would it change the gospel of Christ if you had Paul, if you had Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the writings of Paul, 1 Peter, 1 John, Jude and 2 Peter were hotly contested. But would it change the gospel? No. Absolutely not. Do not worship making an idol out of the New Testament, saying, it's not the church. Really? It wasn't post-Pentecost that these things got written? It wasn't well after the apostles had died out and these things were scattered across the world that martyrs were shedding their blood. There was no collection of New Testament books, that at least nothing that looked like the New Testament that's in the King James, until well over 300 years. Athanasius mentions these, but nobody collected them into a codice. And we have no idea what Constantine's 50 Bibles looked like. None of those survive. The Armenians have the third letter to Paul's third letter to the Corinthians. The Latin West had preserved the letter to the Laodiceans. Why aren't those in the canon? Because the church said, no, we don't. Those can drop out, and they did. So, a Bible-based church. So you're going to read the New Testament, and then you are the church, or was the church founded once by Christ and the apostles, and not over and over and over again for just anybody? Like the Marcionites. I mean, you could be in the line of the Marcionites or the Valentinians, denying Christ had a physical body, or you could reject Paul and say, well, he wasn't a real apostle, and we're just going to use, a truncated, weird form of Matthew, and impose Mosaic law and say you have to be circumcised. Now you've just left any tradition of the church. And the church, well, after 300 years, says we're gonna compose these because this is what we believe. Was Peter written by Peter? Was 2 Peter written by Peter? Was Jude written by Jude? Was the Apocalypse of John? I mean, it teaches the gospel. It's a representation of what the apostles believed, and it doesn't. It's a good witness to it. Whoever wrote this, even if they were maybe of the school of Simon Peter, or school of John, which is perfectly normal. Because if they were taught by John, they wouldn't put their own name on it if they were writing it, because they would see that as, oh, I'm forging it because I'm getting all my ideas from John. Today, it's the reverse. If I taught you everything, you'd put your name on it if you're writing it. But it was the other way. The ancient world would say, this is the teaching of John. This isn't your teaching. You took all these ideas from John. And said, yeah, but I wrote it. Well, no. That's of John, and that's the teaching of John. That's the school of John. So it was the teaching of the apostles, and it was the belief in Christ, not an assembly of books. Which, again, a Bible-based church. There's only one person who can start the church. It's Christ. And the church was only started once. It started once at Pentecost. That's it. Done. Unless you want to be in the line of heretics like Marcion and Valentinus and Simon Magus and all these people. Unless you want to be in that line. You'd either have to reject Paul, or reject Christ at a physical body, or reject grace, or is this Cerinthus? Is this teaching of Cerinthus or any of these other people? So you can either change the gospel of Christ, or the gospel of Christ, which is the good news, which was taught and which martyrs shed their blood for. The men holding the gospel in their hearts assembled the accounts that get called the Gospels, the gospel according to, not the one true gospel of Christ, which is taught by all the apostles. Paul, you could have got the gospel from Peter, Andrew, any of them. Because the gospel is Christ is died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. Put your faith in Christ. Christ saves. Run to Christ. Cling to Christ. God is love. That's the gospel. For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son. That's the gospel right there. The idea that if there was one book missing, if 2 Peter wasn't there, the gospel would vanish from the face of the earth. No. These works are getting burned for centuries by pagan Romans. Some people had just a few works, but they had the faith of the apostles, and that's what kept them going. I don't see Bible-based church. Is a Bible-based church sane? It's not even historical. How can you even be Christian?